Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And for this month's book club reading, we are reading The Sapling Cage, written by fellow podcaster and friend of the show, Margaret Killjoy. Yay. And yes, again, fellow podcaster, Anney and I have both been on her show called Cool People Who Did Cool Stuff. So you should go and listen to those if you want to. Also, if you're not already subscribed to Margaret's Substack, you should, because I'm going to read this off of her Substack, margaretkilljoy.substack.com. That's where you can find it. And she writes, "It's a funny place for me to be in as a reasonable, established author, but I do feel a sort of weight and importance about this book and this book launch myself as well, because The Sapling Cage is the best thing I've written so far. I'm proud of all of my books, but by giving myself the larger canvas available to this long form, I've been able to start really saying some of the stuff I want to say during this one life I have. The Sapling Cage is a coming-of-age, high fantasy story, the first in a trilogy. It's a crossover book, which is a genre developed by the publishing industry to acknowledge that a lot of readers of young adult books are regular adults and not young ones. Us. This genre exists to say, quote, yes, the protagonist is a teenager, but we won't hold ourselves to all of the conventions of the young adult genre. Which isn't to say this book is more violent or explicit than other young adult books, it's not, but rather that I didn't have to limit myself to a specific emotional voice or treat the romance within it in some specific and formulaic way, which is important to me because I want to write honestly about the experiences of a trans teenaged witch." Yes, so that is what we are reading. And one day we do hope to have her on the show. She is quite busy. We understand, doing all those podcasts, writing all of these books, being as amazing as herself. She's been on tours and tours for her books as well. So one day, cross your fingers. It's going to happen.
Maybe
we really
for
do
the
know
next
her, y'all.
one.
Yeah.
We do.
We really do know her, y'all. Again, we do want to bring her back about the books. And hopefully, yeah, when the trilogies come out, maybe we can have a whole big conversation about all the books because they are amazing. But if you haven't read this book yet, I think we should stop you right here and tell you to go and buy her book. The Feminist Press is where I got my book. And stop, read it, and then come back because we're going to give you some light spoilers. However, we're going to change it up a little bit because we don't want to give it all away. It's too new. She deserves you to buy her book and hear it from her own mind instead of our summary. So we're going to give very vague summary without the ending for this, so that you, again, listeners, can go and check this book out because it's an easy read, right, Anney?
Yeah. And we've said this before. Sometimes we worry about page length because we have to read it. Like I read it in one day.
Right.
So I was a little concerned about the length, but we really wanted to read it. I was really intrigued by the idea of it. And it went so quickly. And it was one of those things when you're looking at the page numbers and you just know like, oh, this is not going to wrap up neatly.
Right.
There's going to be another one.
This feels like a beginning explanation. It's definitely like setting the scene for you, and then it gets you in there. So yes, this is the first novel of a trilogy. You know, we love trilogies here. We love them. And it's very dense in its setup with the plot and many characters. Because it is a great coming of age story, it has like all these layers of identity, friendship, epic magical battles, romance. There's a lot. So we're just going to highlight the plot again without giving you the complete ending because, again, we think it's worth you taking the time to buy and read her book. So very, very loose summary, I guess is the way I'm going to put this. So we have Lorel, who is the main protagonist, a young girl in a boy's body. She knows who she is and is trying to navigate the world with her secret. Her best friend, Lane, has been promised to the witches, which apparently is a thing, as her mother was known as Leona, one of the Leona of the Leaves, I believe, and she was a very famous witch. So therefore, Lane was promised to her to become a witch. But Lane doesn't want to be a witch. She wants to be a knight or something completely different. Solution? Lorel will take her place in hopes that she doesn't get caught. She's always wanted to be a witch. She's had dreams of it. She's been ready to be a witch. So she's going to take her place. Lorel's mother, who is worried, is understanding. She's actually very supportive, even though she's very worried. And Lorel sets off into her new journey. So yes, she comes out when the witches come to pick up Lane to say, I am the chosen one. And she is. Lorel is joined then by another young one who has also been promised, named Hex, who did not want to be there and was forced to be there because she was also promised, even though she didn't want to. And unlike Lane, didn't have a friend to take her place. So Hex is miserable and wants to make Lorel miserable as well. Then we meet Anney, also promised to be there, raised by a druid, and she quickly becomes friends with everyone. Like, everyone wants to be her friend. Lorel wants to be her friend. Hex wants to be her friend. There's a little competition that's going on. She seems really cool. But things in this world is brewing. Trees are dying. Propaganda against witches have begun. Children and people are disappearing and dying. A fascist regime is taking control via a queen who has started a new branch of knights, the tax knights, who are cruel and take things from the poor and regular citizens. Really bad people. The witches have decided that they have to come together and they have to kind of have a conversation about what to do, because since there's all this propaganda against them. Do they fight against this fascist regime, or do they fight against this wicked new thing, which is killing the trees again, which is known as the Blight? So they have to have this very big discussion. Their democracy, more of a commune, a community. Socialist party, I guess, is the way we probably would go. They have a very open conversation and have votes and really, go through the time. So that's the witches trying to figure out what to do. Lorel, during this time, is learning to battle physically and kind of magically, not quite yet, but she sees, she can see magic and she knows how it works and she can figure out how to find the ley, which is what she sees as the magic, but more physically again. She's learning to fight with axes and swords and all these things. And she's trying to learn to control her strength because there are moments that she does realize she is stronger, but at the same time, she also doesn't want to hurt anything. Hates it. All the while, again, trying to hide her secret. But slowly, her coven all start to discover her secret. Everything happens. I was like, yeah, I don't think that could last long, right? No? And yeah, exactly how it went. But no one really cares. She's a witch. She's chosen to learn magic, and she's, to them, who she says she is. So it's quite beautiful. Of course, there's still kind of a lot of confusion and conversation that has to be worked out for herself and the witches. But, they're all like, yeah, you're one of us. Of course. You can see the ley. You're magical. Welcome. We also learned that there was another witch before Lorel who was also hiding that same secret, Dame Catkin, but had found a spell to make her as she was. But it also included using a bone from another person, and that person that helped her was there, but Catkin had actually disappeared. So Sorrel was really a big fighter for her. She actually didn't know the spell, though. That's what she has to say. We did this, and I love her, and all these things, and then she disappears, and we don't know what happens. I have a feeling that's gonna be a later thing. You know. So we find out that our witches who are using blight magic to make themselves more powerful and killing innocent people. The tax knights are relentless and trying to come after anyone who would be against the queen, including and especially the witches. Also, we have, again, Hex, who's still there, has left the coven to be a knight. And she is now happier than ever. But her friend, Deity, is not happy, and she's very sad, and she's just miserable. But she's there.
Hex joins the anti-knights. They're sort of like knights that left the knighthood to fight the knights.
Yes, essentially fight the fascists. This is kind of what it is.
Yeah.
They're kind of last remaining. All the while, we see more and more trees dying. We have worm monsters, WYRM, an underground sea monster with eyes as well. We have all these different things. And then we have the whelps all fighting them. And the whelps, I didn't explain this earlier, are the youngest of the witches, or the newest witches who are learning to become witches and become dames. They're called whelps at the beginning. They're the ones that's doing all the adventure. You know what I'm saying? And fighting a lot and discovering a lot within this time. And during this time, two of them, including Deity, have figured out how to use this blight magic to heal people and have done so. So that's something to think about. And by the way, it's used through saplings that are in skulls and cages, or that's where they're maintained.
Yeah, it's like the power. They're drawing up the lay into these cages.
That has a sapling as well as a new skull, as in like recently murdered person skull. And it comes with a cost, though. So there's this whole back and forth when they are discovered that they had used as magic. They can't see the lay anymore. The lay won't choose them. So it was all these things. And we have Lorel here fighting for them. They can't be, they're trying to be excommunicated or being sent off. And they're like, no, we can help. And they're still a part of our coven. Very sweet. Then we have this huge gathering of everyone due to the threat of the blight magic, as well as the abusiveness of the queen, about what they're going to do to fight against this evil and how to do it and who will be in charge and who will do what and all these things. And it comes to the point that they have decided to allow the witches to stop the blight magic first. And then if that doesn't work, they'll go after the queen.
Yeah. A lot of politics at that part.
A lot of politics back and forth. And then we have Lorel discovering some things. And then we do have a great ending with a kind of battle with the unexpected people to be the villains, or expected. It's according to how well you read into things. And if you think about it too long, it kind of is. But then you have also a happily ever after with Lorel really figuring out who she was and who she is and who she always has been. Also a great little reunion between Lane and Lorel. Really cute too.
Yeah.
Oh, all the while RNA and Lorel become a couple. But they're also a very confused back and forth conversation. It's also very sweet.
They're figuring things out.
They're figuring it out. We have a feeling there's going to be things that need to be talked about.
Yes. Indeed.
Right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So that is my very vague, loose summary of this wonderful book, The Sapling Cage, which again, you should really take some time to read because these characters are fantastic and they're very sweet. I love the use of magic and I love the way that Margaret has turned the character of the witches into something that is unexpected, which is not typical of what we know about witches.
Yes, because I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but they have seen so much loss and so much persecution that they're very almost feral. They have to learn to fight. And so one of the things one of the witches says early on is about the power of threes, which I love because it's a trilogy, but it's the seasons of summer, fall, spring. So I think that's how it's going to play out. Is this was learning the physical part. The next part will be the word part, which is the other tool of fighting that was described. And then the third part will be the magic part, because spring is when the rebirth and the magic happens. That's just what I think. But yeah, it was cool because you got to see a lot of viewpoints and have a lot of discussion about and disagreement, but like a kind of a healthy disagreement most of the time of like, what should we do? What do we think about this? How should we move forward? But it was all undergirded by the fact that they'd lost. When there were 5 covens and there was the one left and like stragglers of the others.
Right.
And so having sustained all that loss, having to keep in mind, how do we keep ourselves alive, but also this realm alive? Right. Yeah, it's really good. And the imagery is amazing. I love it.
It is. It's very good.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about some themes and I guess ideas within the book. It's not all necessarily themes, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more to say as the trilogy comes about and as when Margaret comes onto the show. But one of the big things I bet for sure is identity, whether it's like gender or sexual identity. All those things came into play. And here was a quote that actually, these are 3 quotes that are from Lorel that I thought were like really succinct and like, yeah, this is what she's going through, her thought process. She writes, "One of my earliest memories was being glad that my name was Lorel, as common for girls as it was for boys." And, the whole like idea of dead naming and then renaming themselves and rebirth is a big deal within every community. I've talked about my own name and trying to find my identity as a Korean person using my American name and all these things. And I know that's something that's a huge conversation and really important in being able to claim a name and feeling home in a name. really does bring a part of your identity, right? And I thought that was really interesting. I was like, okay, from jump. This is, by the way, yeah, chapter 1. This is what we're reading from chapter 1. And then she goes on to say, talking about how she is trying to navigate this world in knowing who she is, but not necessarily accepted by everyone. She says those, and she's talking about her mom and Lane, are the only 2 people in town who I talked about how I should have been a girl. And like in this other conversation and understanding not everyone's going to understand, which is a shame. And then she talks about when she gets ready to be a part of the coven and Lane gives her mother's clothes. She says, I took it and put it on, talking about a necklace. It hung just above the low neckline of the long dress, the stone cool and comforting against my chest. Despite how I was born, I was going to be a witch. Despite how I was born, I was going to get to live as a woman. And it was just such a beautiful scene of her being able to have her own dresses as hers and being able to really fully embrace who she's always been. Sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. And at this point, Lane wants to be a knight. And it is acceptable for women to be knights.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's not really acceptable on a large scale, at least, right. For men to be witches. So even though Lorel is a woman, identifies this way, all of this has this fear of it. And it's really sweet to see her have this scene of like trying on the clothes and being so excited and like, yes, I finally get to do this.
Right. And
Lane gets to do what she wants to do.
Exactly. The fact that they're protecting each other is very, very precious. And the fact that they love each other for that and to help each other live each other's dreams, that's the part that is so genuine. And this is a part in which Lorel has a conversation because she finds out after the fact, because she just wanted to be a witch so badly she didn't think about it, even if she was discovered. Like, oh, there was another person who was like me, and they were able to change into becoming an actual, and like bodily that way. And her trying to figure out, is this what she wanted? Why would she want this? What does she want? And this is what she writes. All I knew is I wanted to be a witch. All I knew was I wanted people to let me be a woman, to call me a woman, to treat me like a woman. Anything about my body felt secondary. So in understanding that that's who she is and everything else, it's kind of just like, okay, maybe this is what it seems like, but is it really who I am? No. She's talking about, of course, like she's gotten injured at this point. She's like, so my biggest problem right now is I have a broken hand. Which is like, yes, that's the bigger problem. But I think it's really interesting because she has this conversation throughout the book because they are talking about whether or not the spell exists, who can do it, what the cost would be, and that for somebody to sacrifice part of themselves for this. And also the fact that, because we're going to talk about relationships in a minute, but the fact that 2 people stepped up fighting over who would be the one to sacrifice themselves is really, really precious.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I'm glad that conversation was in there. Just her wrestling with what did she really want. Because at first she was so determined to get this spell. And there was only like, in theory, 2 people that knew it. And one of them may be dead. Like, we don't know. But then kind of coming around to like, you know what, maybe I don't need that.
Yeah. Why am I wanting this? Why do I need this? Mm-hmm. There's a lot to be said about that, about not liking yourselves. But also like, it's interesting to see characters like Hex, who also felt like she needed to figure, like she knew herself, but she couldn't be herself. And really hating that as well. Like she's been predetermined to be a witch, Hex. Yeah. But she's hating every bit of it and hated Lorel because she thought that Lorel was buying into it and not seeing the truth. And then in actuality, she's like, oh, I get it. You got a secret too. Like it was really interesting to see. I also want to talk about Aspen and his character because I was like, look at Margaret. Of course she does. Like, of course you need to bring in this asexual character who has to like also fend himself in the aspect of like, oh, I have to say it this way in order to be normal, quote unquote, because if not, they'll harass me. But I'm not interested in sex whatsoever. I'm not interested in men or women. I just want to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's both sad and kind of clever what he did because basically they have these rules they make that they live by, and he made one that was like, no relationships for me. It messes with my head. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
Go ahead. But he's also one of the most enjoyable characters. I did really love like Margaret putting in all these sarcastic notes in this book.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, it doesn't fit in the realm necessarily of like this, what seems like it should be an ancient tale. But I'm like, yeah, I enjoy this. And Espen was that character in that, like, he was just sarcastic all the time with the rock and be like, hey, haha, well, you said this, so I don't know what you want. Like, just antagonizing people the entire time, which was quite entertaining. And then I think another big conversation in this, because we had it from jump, is about choices, being able to choose for yourself your own destiny. We see it with Lane, we see it with Lorel, we see it with Hex, we see it with Dady. There's so much in the conversation in trying to figure out how to get their own choices. And eventually, even though that the whelps were locked in the end, a lot of the elder witches were like, nah, you're free to choose. You chose this. At one point, we have a scene in which Lorel refuses to kill a fawn. I get it. Because she's like, you don't do that. They're innocent creatures. Why are you doing this? And because of her choice, they were without meat. And they're like, you chose what you chose. And that's fine. We were good with that. Even though she thought they would all get mad at her and that she would be severely punished and all these things. But it became very clear that she was like, oh, yes, there are rules, but at the same time, there are allowances to be able to have free will in this moment. And here's a quote that I thought was great. So this is after Hex decides to run away, and she's allowed to run away to go join the Anti-Knights. Lorel says, you going to change your name? I asked her. I figured your parents named you Hex because you were promised to the order. Not going to change it, she said. I mean, all my life, I've hated my name because it meant I had to be a witch. But now I don't have to be. So it's a reminder of who I didn't have to be, who I got to choose to be. And I thought that was such an enlightening moment for all of them in understanding that this is really important. Being able to choose your destiny and having some kind of autonomy is really important.
Yes. And I think there are so many instances of that when it can kind of feel odd when you're like thinking about it, perhaps from our modern day standards of like these kids, they're running around. But, you know, I think it's very fulfilling. And I like that a lot of times the kind of mentor witches, like Lament, will just kind of like be like, okay, why? Think about, like, explain it to me.
Right.
I'm not going to stop you. I'm just curious. Right. And then she goes on her way.
Right.
And I like that. Where it's just like, think about your decision, but it's your decision.
I mean, she really does. She's like, I disagree with you, but okay, you do you.
Yeah, pretty much. She's often like, all right, I'm not going to help you out, but good luck.
I'll give you a warning. Good luck with that. Yeah. I also, did find really like part of this conversation in all of this is that they were respecting the younger, as you were saying, in that giving them the option to be part of the conversation, being there. Like, she's like, okay, you want to fight for Data and the other one who what we see is wrong. They violated it. And not only wrong, but like it kind of means that they can't practice magic because of this. Then y'all need to figure out how to fix this. And it's just like, we're holding you accountable, and allowing you to do it. And they took up that accountability and responsibility and took off in that journey, even though it was very dangerous and, you know, almost killed them in general. But then they discovered so many more things. But that in itself felt like a conversation that we often have, like the younger generations. Sure, we have to remember they're human. They're allowed to make choices, and they are able to take accountability and take responsibility. And oftentimes when you give them the right tools and resources, they really will do great. Sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah.
And I say this for myself even, because there's choices that I made as a kid. I'm like, damn, why?
Yeah. Well, gotta learn, I guess.
But at the same time, I was one of the more responsible ones. in the teenage years. So,
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You gotta let people learn and grow. It hurts. It hurts. But it does allow them for that choices, whether it's good or bad. And then, as we said, obviously, relationships throughout in this thing, there's so many. Like, we had the relationship again with Lane and Lorel, who was the purest form of like best friends and a love that they are willing to do for each other and sacrifice for each other and help each other, as well as Dady and Hex. Again, they were the best friends that hated everyone, but it really put them together. And at one point, there was a question of like, do you love her? And Dady is like, yes, but she doesn't love me and I don't care anymore. Like,
yeah.
Genuinely the cutest.
Yeah. She was going through it.
She was, poor thing. And then you have the love between Lorel and Anney. Again, the confusion, the kind of working things out for Anney herself, who was like, I don't know, I'm confused, and you're this, and now you're that, but you're this. Like, it's this back and forth. And Lorel also feeling confused because it kind of felt like a betrayal, but at the same time, she understood it.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, they kind of talked it through, and Anney was like, I've always been attracted to boys, and so I felt like when I found out this secret, then it made sense. But now it doesn't make sense because I know you, and that's not who you are.
Right.
So I'm just struggling with this. And Lorel understandably felt hurt, but also was like, no, I get it. But they kind of kept working through it, and I really appreciated that they were like, okay.
Yeah.
Let's just...
obviously something that they're going to have to talk about. But even with that, Anney was able to be like, I will sacrifice a bone for you.
Yes.
If this is what you want.
Yes.
I will do this in a heartbeat. So she was ready. And that's, in fact, the whole journeys, whenever they would go anywhere, she was right there with her.
Yes.
So all that. But then also, again, Dame Catkin and Dame Sorrel, it's just a blip in that conversation. I have a feeling we're going to get a deeper look. Possibly later down the road, but like because like she really stands up for Lorel in that private conversation among the elder witches, which again was like heartbreaking, but very realistic in that term. And they were having a back and forth, and Dame Sorrel fighting tooth and nail in order to make sure everyone understood Lorel belonged there, as well as Lorel is a woman who's a young girl going into her womanhood, just like everybody, all the other whelps. It was very sweet to see. But again, I have a feeling we need to remember these names.
Put a pin in that one.
Just saying. Just saying. And then we have the propaganda used by evil. I really wanted to put this in here because we know Margaret well enough to know that this is very pointed in this time. And the whole like killing and then creating a mess and then blaming the witches for it because they know they are an easy scapegoat. Any marginalized community that was able to be used from jump is easy prey. And they have that with a queen, with other people who are seen as evil, and like they're like, okay, this is what's happening, as well as the fact that we have those who are really excited about stepping on those who are already in a hard position. So like the villagers who are being overtaxed and who are being run by like all the diseases, the blight that was happening. Like they were the ones who were suffering the most because of this type of evil. I'm sure again, because spoiler alert, the queen doesn't die. You should know this in the story.
Yeah, well, it is a trilogy.
It is a trilogy, and she is a good politician, so it seems.
Any way the wind blows, the politician goes. Yeah. I mean, it was very... because when we first meet the witches, and they come to collect Lorel, like some of them are wounded. And it's because it's so dangerous just for them to exist and to travel. And because there has been all of this misinformation and disinformation spread about them. And like I said, they've been kind of widely decimated. And they have to be careful who they trust and talk to. But it seemed like, at least in the suffering village that they went to first, they were like, witches, yes, please help us save our the Prar. Yeah. And they were not into the knights at all. Mm-hmm.
As a thing, that a side note that I didn't mention in the story, but the more powerful the witch, the more, I won't say grotesque, but monster-like is how she describes it. They become less like human and more like some other creatures. So some of them had like talons, I believe, and had face of monsters. Some of them were like so pale and skinny, they looked like skin and bones. Like someone was giant, huge, apparently. Like, so the even like their outer appearance would portray them to be the villains in these conversations, when actually they're sacrificing their humanity to save humans.
Yes. And I would also add in here, there was an interesting thing we didn't really get to see too much of that I think will come back. But another thing with, propaganda like this is the erasure of information. And there were some kind of throwaway lines about like were giants actually real? Like there was a couple of things where I was like, so all this history got erased.
Yeah, they became legends.
Yeah.
So half the creatures that they encountered, they're like, well, I didn't think they existed, but here they are.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know where that's going to go, but I thought that was interesting because that is another key point in propaganda efforts like this.
Yeah. And then the fact that they're monsters. And again, they were able to talk to them and they're demons, but yet they're made to be that way.
Yeah.
Again, kind of briefly talking about the unity they come through. The fact that Lorel and the Wells were able to bring them all together, because it really was the fact that Lane and Lorel were friends and were able to get that knighthood to come with them, as well as the fact that they knew Espen already, with the anti-knighthood coming in and bringing in people who they knew would be a part of that type of alliance. They come in and having a whole conversation, which was very political and took forever, and they just went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I honestly was waiting for them wanted them to be a betrayer. Were you?
I don't think so.
Oh no.
Meanwhile, I mean, maybe
K-dramas. I just assumed one of them would have already been linked to. They kind of were, but like even more so. But like, yeah.
I mean, like we said, it's a trilogy.
Well, it was on shaky grounds. There was a lot of like back and forth. And the witches talk a lot about having to back down and play the game, essentially, in order to get things done.
Yeah. And there was certainly not a lot of trust there, but there was an understanding that this is a bad situation.
Right.
And we've got to fix it. Yeah.
For now, we'll welcome you. Some of the villagers were like that as well. Like, you know what? Since you've been here, everything's been bad. And we've been hearing all of these tales. And that was the other part of the propaganda we didn't talk about, was that it had been all around the lands that it was the witches, and the witches are bad, the witches are bad. Even to the point that Lane, who wrote to Lorel, was saying, hey, I don't believe them, but just so you know, stay away. You might want to run away because the witches are not going to be good in this. They are looking real bad right now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of part of that too, which we know happens a lot. The disinformation, misinformation. And then probably the last thing I'll hit on is life and death. More death.
Yeah.
In this conversation. And here's a quote. It says, "It was bizarre to realize that the most magical things in this world are also, at their heart, mundane and fragile. That a magical sapling can be uprooted. That a witch will die with a sword in her chest the same as anyone." Right. And they lost a lot of people, it seems. Actually, like 5 witches.
It's more than that.
Was it? That's all I can remember.
It's more than that, but a lot of it are not people we know. So.
Okay. Very like blips into the conversation. Well, like I said, there was a lot of death in this, and that kind of understanding. We have a moment when Lorel is facing the sea monster and thinking that she's about to drown, and that Anney is about to drown as well. And where there's a part where she thinks she's about to die. she's realizing who she is, truly who she is, and that she says, I don't want to die a boy. I don't want to die with people thinking this way because I am a woman, I'm a girl. And then she's talking about like who she's becoming and really, really believing who she is and finding a place in this conversation of her body being as well as her heart. And it's kind of one of those moments that you realize, yes, you have so much to do. So obviously this is going to be a catalyst in this giant journey in battle and war that she knows she has stuff to finish.
Yes. And it's also kind of going back to what you were talking about where she couldn't kill the fawn.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lesson. The whelps have a lesson later where one of the witches was like, you know, if you're overwhelmed, how do you go down? Like, what do you do? And they was like, you know, run away. And then somebody was like, deity was like, you go down fighting, kicking, biting, screaming, like the whole thing, like right. You do not stop. And the witch was like, yeah, our numbers are so few. It's your responsibility almost to like right. fight as hard as you can. And that goes back also to the threes, mm-hmm. birth, life, death. So death is a really big theme in here. And there's a lot of imagery around death, like bones and yes. the skulls and things like that.
Yeah. And I think too, like with that, it's kind of that resurgence that the most powerful witches would be in the front and the whelps would be the back, or sometimes the whelps would not be present. They're like, we need to save them. There's so many. And then when they were trying to like excommunicate two of the whelps, they're like, we're all leaving. And they're like, well, there's too few of us. We need these young ones. So we can't do that. So we'll figure it out. Essentially, like they came, again, the united part, because they knew there were too few in number and needed to grow with each other. So that is a very quick rundown of a really great long book that's a part of a trilogy, which we're really excited for. And yes, I know you're probably a little bit like, but what happens? You need to go read the book. Go get the book, y'all.
Go get the book. It's great. And let us know your thoughts about it. Hopefully we'll have Margaret on to talk about the next one. I'm very excited to read it. Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, in the meantime, listeners, you can email us at hello@stuffwenevertoldyou.com. You can find us on Blue Sky at Mom Stuff Podcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I Never Told You. We're also on YouTube, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is production by iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your favorite shows.